Je sens que j'ai un lien très fort avec mes ancêtres ici. Je sais que dans chaque morceau de cette écorce, dans chaque couche de bois à l'intérieur de cet arbre, il y a une partie de leur ADN. Je sens une partie de leur énergie ici, parce qu'ils étaient ici quand cet arbre était encore en vie.
I personally really enjoy stories that take environmentalism and climate change seriously and try to bring awareness to it. So I really enjoy that, especially just the deep dive into the history of when it all began, when scientists were discovering that this was even a thing. So the story, the overarching story of how the big oil companies like Exxon and Shell 40 years ago in the 80s, 70s, 80s actually were fully aware of what their fossil fuels were doing to the environment, but went out of their way to basically demonize science and kind of like debunked everything that the scientists were discovering was just upsetting to see and also super depressing to hear, even though we all know it's true, but actually seeing it in documentation, seeing them talk about it, and seeing the scientists who it affected at that time was just absolutely amazing to see. I loved the different interviews. I loved seeing the different perspectives from different parts of the country, the world, and I thought that was very interesting. I also really liked at the end, there was one quote, or not really a quote, but someone was saying a statement in which she was like, the interviewer asked, like, what do you think could have happened if um, the oil companies had taken responsibility 40 years ago? And she was just kind of like, well, we'd probably have a lot more land here. We'd be in a better state and the world would be essentially a better place safety wise, and we wouldn't have to worry about climate change. So I think that was also an aspect that I really loved because it was depressing.
I really love the imagery and that they caught at the very beginning of the piece. And it's wonderful that they came back to that at the end and gave the whole thing the shape of a story, see this desolation of this beach with all these dead trees. It was quite alarming. The images were captured beautifully though, and it was nicely done. Really interesting moments outlined in this piece included when Greenpeace appealed for that Swiss company to stop saying burning oil is good for the environment. And then seeing the victory in the lawsuit at the end gives you a little hope. But it was really well done. They found great experts to interview. It was nicely directed, edited, paced, great score. So excellent job on this all around.
It is a very eye-opening, sad, heart-wrenching, but yet motivating documentary to really just stand up and do what's right and call out companies, especially big oil, for doing things that are impacting our earth, and especially harmful things that are impacting our earth, especially when they know about it. So in the documentary, we go back and we meet Martin, who was one of the first to model current climate change. He worked for Exxon and was part of their research department. And him and his team found evidence that what Exxon was doing was harmful to the environment. He was hired in 1981, and only a year later, in 1982, he presented this information to his managers at Exxon. But they completely ignored his pleas and his warnings. The graph he created showed, very simple graph. Anyone can read that graph, especially executives and managers at a big oil company. Overall, this was a really well-told documentary. It was told in great chronological order, which was easy to follow, easy to understand, especially, dealing with all these, big scientists' words and theories and everything, even to someone who is not involved in science at all. I was completely able to follow, and it was easy to understand. And, it was eye-opening that you necessarily, like, the world and government isn't what it necessarily seems to be all the time. There's greed involved, there's bribery, There's, shareholders that need to be influenced, and it's just a big, crazy mess. But it was a really well told documentary. But the shocking thing about this was that the big oil companies have known all along that climate change is real and it is happening. And they actually had an action plan to misinform the public on this and sort of create this political issue out of something that is real science that everybody should be worried about and not something that should be political. But by causing doubt, they sort of prevented people from taking action on climate change. And that is the shocking part of this documentary and just sort of disgusting to watch, but so important for people to see and to realize that it is not a political issue, it is a human issue. So this documentary is something that I think everybody should see. It's so informative, showing the literal documentation, highlighting it for us on the screen. I thought that was such a smart idea because you have the cold hard proof and the facts, and you showed it on the screen, highlighted it. You cannot miss that. I thought that was a really smart on the part of the documentary makers, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to climate change, they want to see cold hard proof, and seeing these oil companies smoking guns right in front of us, I thought that was a great idea. I enjoyed seeing everything, the history of this misinformation, seeing that it goes back all the way to the 70s and 80s, and seeing the timeline of that and everything that could have been done that didn't get done because of this misinformation that the oil companies were putting out. I also appreciated that we see the progress that we're making slowly on, bringing justice to this, and call to action to the people to also, hold these companies accountable.
I love how this documentary shines a light on the climate change issues, which have gone unnoticed for a pretty long time, by generation, and how people in higher power try to stop these people from coming forward. A great example would be Greta Thunberg and her work in trying to stop climate change, as well as the protests of Just Stop Oil in the UK, and how they're trying to bring a stop to the ever-growing climate crisis. In the end, one can only understand why these people in power are doing this all for money and nothing about helping humanity, but for the greed and for the power. Only once all these monstrosities and evildoers are removed can there be real change.
I enjoyed the different perspectives that included, the different experts that were interviewed, and I really liked the perspectives that the experts brought into the problem of different opinions on the topic of climate change from scientists and what that means within the media and how that works together. It's a really, really interesting approach to the documentary. It's really informative.